In Lucha Libre there are many sons of, meaning el hijo de, but out of all of them, very few are able to forge their own path and be seen as their own entity, distinct from their predecessors. El Hijo del Perro Aguayo is one of those exceptions. He began to wrestle under the wing of his father, but soon enough, he became his own person. He created the most popular faction in Lucha Libre history, and he became a main eventer in every promotion he stepped in. Many would say he surpassed his father's legacy, but that never really worried him. He knew he was going to make history his own way. Today, Let's Talk Lucha will take a look at one of the fiercest rudos of the 21st century, El Hijo del Perro Aguayo. Pedro Aguayo Ramírez was born in 1979, but his path in Lucha Libre had begun even before that. As his professional name tells you, he is the son of El Perro Aguayo, one of the biggest stars in Lucha Libre. He had memorable feuds with stars like El Santo, and he ultimately took Conan's mask during his time in CMLL. Still to this day, he is remembered as a fierce rudo. He adopted the name Perro, which means dog, because it sounded similar to his name, Pedro, but also because that's exactly what he was in the ring. He was an unbreakable rudo that left blood and sweat on the canvas every time he stepped up to the ring. If you look closely at images of him, on his forehead you can see the scars of all his wars from the 70s and 90s. It's an image that reminds you that Lucha Libre is not a soft sport, and they were also a warning for anyone who dared to face him. His son debuted at the age of 15 in Lucha Libre AAA, facing established and rookie stars. One of the luchadores he got to know very well during his time in AAA was the now famous Rey Mysterio, who would eventually become one of his closest friends. His first big show happened on June 18, 1995 at the 3rd Triplemania, when he faced Juventud Guerrera in a match he was unable to win. His father would often be in his corner, and together they won the National Tag Team Championships on more than one occasion. But he was also part of a stable that didn't involve his father. AAA put him in the team of Los Juniors Atómicos, the Atomic Juniors, alongside Blue Demon Jr., La Parca Jr., and Máscara Sagrada Jr. With them, he won the National Atómicos Championships. After the team eventually lost the championships, it was dissolved, and El Perrito, as he was called by his friends, began a tag team with Hector Garza. If the last name sounds familiar, it may be because you heard of his appearances in TNA or the Royal Rumble in 1997, when AAA had an alliance with the WWF, now WWE, and he's also the uncle of Ángel and Humberto Garza, who currently wrestle for WWE and AAA. Hector and El Perro worked together as a team, even becoming national tag team champions, but they also feuded in AAA. Their relationship grew to such an extent that their careers would forever be intertwined in Lucha Libre. Hector became more than just a co-worker. He became like a brother to El Perro. In 2003, El Hijo del Perro Aguayo left AAA and continued his career in the CMLL. He arrived there under the blessing of his father, and he tried his best to be a likable técnico. He had charisma, but people saw him as someone made in AAA, and he was rejected by most of the promotion's fans. The CMLL put him in a tournament to give him a push, and he actually won that tournament. The prize was to challenge Atlantis for the championship he carried at that moment. The issue was that to get to that point, El Perro had beaten consolidated rudos in the tournament, such as Dr. Wagner Jr. and Rey Bucanero. So when he faced one of the biggest técnicos in the company, people saw him as a rudo, which was not what the company wanted. In the end, he lost the title shot, and the company still struggled to position him as a técnico star. In 2004, El Hijo del Perro Aguayo, once again as a técnico, joined forces with El Negro Casas and Shocker to face Pierrot Jr., Vampiro Canadiense, and Tarzan Boy in a feud that led to a cage match in which the last two luchadores inside would have to put their hair on the line. El Negro Casas and El Perro were the last two, and even though they were on the same team, they had to wrestle to keep their hair. This was the 9th time that El Perro had put his hair on the line, and like all the previous times, he kept it. In total, he bet his hair 13 times during his career, and he never lost one single betting match. Still in 2004, he entered the Leyenda de Plata tournament, which took place every year to honor the great El Santo. During the tournament, he interfered during the match between El Negro Casas and Atlantis, costing El Negro Casas the match. Then in the semifinals, he faced Atlantis and also beat him. He then had to face El Felino, who had won the tournament the previous year. El Perro had an amazing momentum and he ended up winning the tournament. El Hijo del Santo was part of the CMLL back then, and he went out to present El Perro with a trophy. But as soon as El Perro took the microphone, he started tearing El Santo apart, saying he was only popular because he appeared in movies, not because he was a great luchador. He then said his father was a true legend and that he deserved more recognition than what was given to him. He proceeded to destroy the trophy El Santo had given him, engaging the Silver Masked Man. This led to a short feud between the two, cementing El Hijo del Perro Aguayo as a rudo in the company. Now, as a rudo, El Perro wanted to leave a huge imprint in the company, and he knew he couldn't do it alone. Hector Garza had also arrived to CMLL and they started working together. But they needed to broaden their catalog of destruction if they wanted to be feared by the whole roster. So they joined forces with Halloween, Damian 666, and Mr. Águila. It was then that Los Perros del Mal were born. I already have a video covering the story of this stable that would become the greatest faction in Lucha Libre history, so I will focus more on El Perro in this video, but I encourage you to go watch that video once you finish this one. El Perro Aguayo and his teammates quickly became the most dominant faction in the CMLL. They went straight for the main eventers, having matches against top stars like Dr. Wagner Jr. and LA Park. El Perro specifically targeted CMLL's new rising star, Místico. In the description I will leave a link to a match between these two, and I recommend you go watch it to better understand the style that made El Perro famous. He had become a fast-paced, unrelenting punching machine that overwhelmed his rivals and barely let them breathe. He became the representation of what a rudo luchador was meant to be. This left his opponents no choice but to start wrestling in a rudo style against him if they wanted to survive. In this match, you can see how Místico has to match his rudo style to be able to even compete with him. I share this so you can understand how influential he became. There are luchadores nowadays that have a similar style, such as Rush, but El Perrito was unique. He was able to act like the toughest rudo, but he was still likable. People wanted to see more of him. Also, if you pay attention to his boots, you'll see they are very particular. This is the same style of boots Dominic Mysterio usually wears to honor El Perro and his father, as well as the way he wears a t-shirt around his waist, the same way the Perros del Mal t-shirt was on El Perrito's waist. In CMLL, El Hijo del Perro Aguayo became a mega star. He didn't need to win many championships or masks to cement his legacy. Unfortunately for him, his brother Hector Garza renounced Los Perros del Mal in 2008 and they had a hair versus hair match in a sold-out Arena Mexico. One more hair was added to his collection that night, but that one was bittersweet. This would be his last big feud in CMLL before he exited the company that same year. And why did El Perro leave CMLL? Simple. He wanted more. Unlike many luchadores who don't recognize the value of a brand, Pedro knew that Los Perros del Mal brand had great potential. Their t-shirts had become the most sold Lucha Libre t-shirts outside arenas, and people had bought into the identity of being part of the pack. So he decided to bet everything on his own IP and founded a new promotion, Perros del Mal Producciones. He was a great businessman and quickly promoted sold-out shows that included the biggest names in independent wrestling such as Blue Demon Jr., Super Crazy, and El Hijo del Santo. He also got a TV deal with TVC Deportes, and the Perros del Mal shows were seen on national television. He took an idea and created an empire. At just 30 years old, he was forging his legacy. He had stopped being compared to his father for many years now, and for a new generation, he had become the only Perro Aguayo they knew. In June of 2010, Triplemania 18 took place. This is AAA's biggest event of the year, and in the main event, the original La Parca, now known as LA Park, faced the second La Parca for the rights of the character. This was a brutal war, and both men were exhausted laying on the ring when two luchadores with Los Perros del Mal t-shirts came out to the ring and put LA Park on top of his rival. The referee counted, and he won. But the most surprising thing came after. Los Perros del Mal started walking down the ramp while their music played, and behind the pack was their leader. Los Perros del Mal had invaded Lucha Libre AAA and made it their new home. But this didn't mean their promotion had shut down. They actually developed a partnership, so it was common to see AAA wrestlers in Los Perros del Mal shows. They had a heated rivalry with the Psycho Circus, taking their winning streak and facing them many times in their own promotion. Business for Pedro was thriving. He was the fiercest rudo in AAA, and he even had started appearing on national TV in shows that had nothing to do with Lucha Libre. He appeared in the game show Los Cinco Magníficos, which he won, and he even appeared in a telenovela. But in 2011, he had to have a surgery that put a question mark in his in-ring career. In April 2011, El Hijo del Perro Aguayo had an emergency surgery to have a tumor removed. The tumor was the size of a golf ball, and it was located in his stomach. But during the procedure, an ulcer burst, and he had to be put in the intensive care unit. Thankfully, he was able to leave the hospital just 11 days later, and the test proved the tumor was benign. El Perro went straight back to action, and that same year he continued his feud against the Psycho Circus and Dr. Wagner Jr. He then entered a feud with Jack Evans, which took them to Reyes in 2012. There they faced each other, and with a face covered in blood, El Perro won the tournament that year, lifting up the sword that declared him the king of AAA. This gave him a shot for the Mega Campeonato, which he cashed in at Triplemania 20 against El Mesías, but was unable to take the championship from him. The next year, Pedro faced Cibernético in the main event of Triplemania 21, in a betting match where both put their hair on the line. This was a street fight full of interventions. The Perro had to bring out his fiercest side against the leader of La Secta Cibernética. They both finished the match covered in red, and El Perro would take the win in what would be his last betting match, finishing undefeated in this kind of match. He never lost his hair in his 13 betting matches, making it one of the most valuable cabelleras in Lucha Libre history. One unfortunate aspect of this huge win was that Pedro dedicated it to his friend Hector Garza, who had succumbed to lung cancer that same year. In 2014 at Triplemania 22, he faced all rivals from his days in CMLL. Once again in the main event, El Perro faced Cibernético, Dr. Wagner Jr., and the men formerly known as Místico, who had now taken the name Myzteziz. This was a great match involving what are now considered legends of the sport. This was an elimination match, and the first one to go was Dr. Wagner Jr. And if you've been following AAA lately, you might recognize his son appearing during the match. The second one to go was Cibernético, and the two remaining were the men who 9 years before had filled out La Arena Mexico many times. Místico had a turned mask and was covered in red. He was exhausted, and like the best of rudos, El Perro didn't win using his strength, but his cunning. He kicked Myzteziz between the legs and easily took the Triplemania 22 Cup home. After this, the returning Alberto del Rio would come out to face him, and they had a feud in the following months. Myzteziz also wanted a piece of El Perro, and everything pointed to a betting match between the two at the following Triplemania. But sadly, El Hijo del Perro Aguayo wouldn't be present in the next year's event. On March 20, 2015, El Hijo del Perro Aguayo once again was part of the main event of a non-televised show in Tijuana. He was accompanied by Manic, who you might also know as TJP, and they were facing Extreme Tiger and a man who had been by his side when he had started his Lucha Libre career, Rey Mysterio. The match was what you would expect. El Perro was wearing his classic Perros del Mal t-shirt, being the fierce rudo he always was, and fans loved it. There was a point in which Rey applied some head scissors to El Perro, sending him to the outside, and in that movement, the back of his neck hit the apron. He stood right up and went back in. He then received some flying kicks to set him up for Rey's signature 619. He hit the ropes, and then Pedro didn't move. He didn't move when Rey did the 619, and suddenly his body fell to the canvas unresponding. Conan was at ringside trying to wake him up, moving him, maybe thinking he was knocked out. You could see Rey was worried. He kept looking back at Pedro, and he wasn't able to focus on the finish of the match. Agonizing minutes passed without Pedro receiving medical help. It was later said that the doctor present at the show was backstage attending to a couple of luchadores who had also been injured in previous matches. One of them had an injury in the neck, and they didn't want to risk moving him and hurting him further. This luchador was still on top of the only stretcher available, and that's why Pedro had to be carried to the ambulance on a piece of plywood. Hours later, the news broke out. El Hijo del Perro Aguayo had died because of a cardiac arrest after fracturing 3 vertebrae. He was just 35 years old. After the incident, everyone was looking for someone to blame. Some blamed Rey Mysterio, who couldn't help feeling guilty. But El Perro Aguayo Sr. comforted him, telling him that nobody in the family blamed him and that things like this happened in Lucha Libre. Some blamed the promoter of the event, saying that they should have been better prepared for situations like this. In the end, the law didn't find anyone at fault. The medical examiner said that his death had been a matter of seconds and that receiving quick medical attention wouldn't have made a difference. Still, the situation was so shocking in Mexico that new laws were put in place to protect athletes and avoid similar situations. El Hijo del Perro Aguayo is still remembered by Lucha Libre fans. Some of us saw him when we were just kids, and were shocked to learn about his passing when we were just learning to become adults. Some other fans were able to see his father wrestled and then marveled when they saw his son become something else entirely. Pedro Aguayo Ramírez, El Hijo del Perro Aguayo, left a huge imprint in the story of Lucha Libre. He's one of the few luchadores who was able to outgrow the shadow his father had left, and he was one of the founders of the greatest faction in Lucha Libre history. His legacy is present every time someone mentions Los Perros del Mal, given that part of his legendary name is embedded in the name of the faction. His tragic passing put the spotlight on the lacking conditions many luchadores face when they step up to the ring, and it's impossible not to wonder how far he could have gotten if he had accomplished so much at just 35 years of age. Pedro possesses an aura that has been seen in Lucha Libre but very few times. El Perrito hasn't been forgotten, and as long as Los Perros del Mal exist, as long as there's a fan with one of his t-shirts, the leader of the pack, El Hijo del Perro Aguayo, will remain. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you like learning more about El Hijo del Perro Aguayo, the founder of Los Perros del Mal. Let me know in the comments what other luchadores would you like to see in this type of videos, and follow me to learn more about Lucha Libre. I'm Eric, and I will see you in the next video.